Hey, everybody, welcome back here to another podcast, Fireside Chat, where we deep dive into the journeys of extraordinary individuals who've dedicated their lives to service, leadership, and impact. So super excited today. We introduce a man whose story embodies resilience, faith, unwavering commitment to others, Mr. Zac Cannon, a devoted husband and father, a 20-year veteran of special operations, and a seasoned warrior who has answered the call to serve time and time again. With multiple combat deployments under his belt, Zac has faced the toughest challenges on and off the battlefield. Now, as he steps into a new chapter beyond military service, Zac remains steadfast in his mission, giving back to his community, mentoring the next generation, and leading with purpose. His journey is far from over. In many ways, it's just beginning. And today we're going to talk about Zac's insights on leadership, faith, and the transition from a life of service to a life of significance in this next chapter of his life. So, Zac, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks for having me. And wow, you gave me way more credit than I would expect.
Well, good. And it's I think it's worthy of noting that even though it hasn't been super long since I've known you, it was in the short time, it was a very impactful time. We've had we have a lot of mutual friends that I'm sure that we're going to discuss throughout this.
Oh, most likely.
But yeah, just so people know, right, I had an opportunity to serve alongside Zac for not a very long time, but probably about 6-7 months. And he made a huge impact on me. And his ability to just be able to talk to people, understand like the root problem, and just provide mentorship and always have a door open. And really be, honestly, like vulnerable and open with what you were going through in your own life. And I think we found a lot of common ground there. And then when I told you what I was kind of doing here, you were like,
yeah.
Oh, you are? Okay, well, let's talk about it. Yeah, I had to ask you to be a guest, and it's taken 5 months, but now we're finally on it.
We've had to reschedule a few times, and then we almost rescheduled tonight because we really wanted to do it in person, but we just didn't work out this time. And it's like, nah, the world needs to know.
Yeah, awesome.
The world needs more Chad.
Or it needs more Zac.
Or both.
Well, you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about your childhood and how everything was growing up?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Hastings, Nebraska. It's a town just shy of 25,000 people. I would say my childhood's like a typical all-American childhood. You know, I played every sport I could. At one point, my parents were like, because I want to get in the Boy Scouts, and they said, sports or scouts? And I said, sports it is. So I played all the sports growing up, from starting to play t-ball, the league soccer, all the way to varsity football my senior year in high school. I don't think there was, minus basketball season in high school, that's the only season I took off. I was always playing sports. You know, my dad served in the Navy, was stationed in Iceland during Vietnam. Both my grandparents served in World War II. One of them also served in Korea. And so that coupled with my brother serving in the Air National Guard currently kind of led me into the military. I always knew I wanted to join from a real young age. I wanted to be the next Rambo, as I think most people in our profession kind of did. And I signed up a week after I turned 18, so my parents couldn't sign for it. It was my first legal decision as an adult. And then a couple months after I graduated high school, I left for the Army.
What year you joined in 2005?
I joined July 27th, 2006.
Okay, so for people that don't know, right during the surge, 2006, 2008, and that's when I came in.
Yeah, I was in the surge in Iraq and Afghanistan.
So you came in, joined the infantry, because why not?
So it's so funny. So yeah, I joined the infantry. I did OSA in airborne school there at Fort Benning, and I reported to Fort Bragg December 20th, 2005. Only time I've ever heard that kind of a report date. I got to my unit in January of 2007, and I was told within 90 days I'd be in Iraq, which is also funny because I was an 82nd replacement, and a group of us got orders to go. Back then they had 19th replacement if you were going to 18th Airborne Corps. And we're like, oh, there's Corps LURS. And so I did my research on what a LURS unit was. I got real excited. I got my orders, and it said 600 Quartermaster Company. I'm like, wait a minute, what the heck is that? So I actually was in the surge in Iraq as an infantryman with parachute riggers. Yeah, so we were doing convoy security. So we would, escort supplies from base to base. But the company was deactivating, and so they wanted to get one final deployment in the GWAT in. So they took everyone: parachute riggers, infantry, field artillery, cooks, sanitation. Didn't matter. They needed bodies. So that's how I ended up in a quartermaster company for my first deployment.
Was it, I mean, fun is really not the right word. I'm sure it was interesting coming from OSET, being around a lot of, I don't want to say like-minded people, where everybody is just on the same glide path, right? Like everybody's on the same glide path to where you go into a completely different environment, if you will, right? With not as many
Yes.
like-minded people.
It was definitely interesting. I can say I definitely learned what a leader was and was not in that organization. It was interesting because, in the infantry, they always say, specialists are team leaders. You stand at parade rest for them. I don't know if I stood at parade rest for anyone except maybe the first sergeant as a PV2. It was definitely interesting getting into Iraq and doing convoy security and all the train up that it was for that. But I've met a lot of lifelong friends in that organization as well.
So where did you go from there then? How long were you in Iraq for?
So I was in Iraq for 13 months, deployed March 17th, 2007, and I got back April 30th, 2008. So almost 14 months I was in Iraq. Came back, I was in the unit in 600 quartermaster still up until November. I got married November 1st and then went on like a week or two of leave and then reported to the 8th and signed into the 4th Brigade Combat Team.
Which is no longer around anymore.
It's not. Nope. I was a member of 1508, which I believe is under 3rd Brigade now. So, yeah, Fury from the sky.
How long did you deploy to Iraq with them too?
No, I went to Afghanistan, so I showed up, right? And this is where the 82nd taught me that if you have a badge, you wear it. And I just so happened to have a combat action badge as an infantry guy. And so they made me wear it. And I got so many people ask me, "Hey, are you the new Fister? Are you the new Fister?" I was like, "No." So I ended up going to Afghanistan in August 2009 as an infantryman. We were out west. So we did 12 months in Afghanistan.
Okay. Then you guys came back in 2010?
Yep, got back August 2010. And then about a year later, I reported to Civil Affairs Selection.
What was the difference between the Iraq and the Afghanistan deployment, do you think? Like between the learning curve and just like how you started to develop, which is I guess kind of a double-edged question because a lot of guys, gals, people, they deploy. A lot of people deployed when they were 18 or 19. And then when you went on your second deployment, you were maybe 20, 21, and you missed a lot of growth, right? Like civilian side growth, but you grew as like a person.
Yeah.
Can you look back and like pick on anything in that?
So it was interesting. I got to Iraq as a PV2 and I left as a PFC, doing everything from driving to gunning, lead convoy, lead vehicle, rear vehicle, kind of all in between. And then when I got to the infantry, my squad leader was going to Jumpmaster school. And so here's new to the infantry Specialist Cannon, instantly a weapons squad leader who little to no infantry background whatsoever. So definitely steep learning curve on that. And then before Afghanistan, I switched to being a rifle team leader. And so it took a lot because the only type of leadership I really had was from Iraq. And so I didn't have a lot of principles, or I didn't know what a good leader was in the infantry, if that makes sense. So it was very, very steep learning curve. But luckily in Afghanistan, where we were at, a fire team shared a room. So we were always together. So I knew the dudes very, very well. And our platoon was extremely tight. We were always having platoon parties. We had the going away party at my house because I had a pool at the time. People had family in. It was just a huge party and everybody knew everybody.
That's awesome. And you bring up a good point too, because you think about what a leader was or what it wasn't like in the infantry. And this isn't just exclusive to that. This could be exclusive to any corporate job too. Obviously there's like different levels of management and different occupations and different people react or treat those that they're within their charge differently, right? Because not all the jobs in the Army are life and death, right? They can be, but they're more focused on a technical skill, right? In the quartermaster company, they're focused, I would argue, more technical versus the infantry where your job is solely to close with and destroy,
Yeah.
At times you do need very angry, hungry people.
which our platoon definitely was. We were the only infantry platoon in the company that was 100% manned. So we actually got attached to 473 Cav, that is also no longer around, for Afghanistan. So our company was out in eastern Afghanistan, RC East, and we were out west with 473 Cav in Herat province, attached to HHT, their headquarters and headquarters troop.
Did you work with any of the other troops, like Charlie Troop?
A little bit. We would do kind of supporting operations and whatnot. And it's interesting because one of the leaders I look up to, the late First Sergeant Russell Bell, he was the Charlie Troop First Sergeant. And then he came over when I got back to the 1508. We redeployed. He was over as, I don't know if he was HHC or another First Sergeant. So we were always on airborne ops together. And then in the 2012 deployment, he actually stepped on a landmine and was killed. So even thinking about him now, I think all the time in Afghanistan when he was talking or on jumps, he was always spitting little nuggets of truth and leadership. So it was great to have known him in that short amount of time.
Yeah, and I asked that because someone else that I had gone through the course with a long time ago, his brother-in-law, who you might know, Travis Mills, who was one of the quadruple amputees, was in 473. And I believe he was in Charlie Troop. So that's why I was wondering if you guys ever had some interaction.
So I went to ALC Phase 2 with him, with Travis. Yeah.
So I don't know how Travis was before injury. His brother-in-law is the one who I went to the course with. And I got to meet Travis, and we met in Savannah. And I don't think a serious word came out of that guy's mouth. Like, he was just, I don't know if that's how he was then, but he was just all about having a good time, like letting people know, like, hey, man, this isn't going to keep me down.
Yeah, we would do runs, right, for Phase 2, because it was an MTT that was here at Bragg. And we'd go on runs, and he's like, I'm not built for running. Yeah, but yeah, definitely no Travis.
So you came back from Afghanistan. Was there anything that like impacted you that you kind of carry and like lessons learned you carry today with?
One of the big things that hit the nail on the head. So we lost our commander in Afghanistan, and then a PFC. So we lost Captain Daniel Witten and PFC Zachary Lovejoy from Charlie 1508. And even though we were on the other side of the country, the HHT command team and the chaplain, once they found out, they kind of pulled the platoon together and they had to tell us. But the squadron command team didn't show up. And so that kind of always stuck with me, is like, you have guys that are on loan to you for a deployment and they just lost their organic commander and someone else, and you don't even bother showing up. And so that's kind of always stuck with me, that if someone's going through a hard time, whether it be a death, potential divorce, whatever they're going through, is they need people there, whether they're part of your organic organization or not. And that's kind of something I've always taken with me as I progressed up the ranks.
Yeah, because people need to know you care, right? And they're not going to know how much you care until you can show them.
Absolutely.
So it's crazy that you say that, because then, so now we'll move. So you get done with your time in the infantry and you report to the Q course, essentially, right? Which was 2012.
So back in my day, as the kids say, it was a PCS move. So I PCS'd from the 82nd, or interpost transfer from the 82nd over to SWIC in November 2011.
All 2 miles.
I know, right? And I didn't go to selection until January 5th. So, in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, right, we always joke it's the Army Ramadan because nobody's working. So it's kind of, hey, there's a detail, hey, there's not. We show up at 9, nothing's going on, we'd go home, which was great. And then January 5th went to selection. January 10th, found out I got selected, and following Monday start of the course.
Heck yeah. So you went through the course, came out on the other side of it, and you allegedly learned French?
Allegedly. Yeah, and it's interesting to think, too, looking back. So we found out New Year's Eve 2011 that my wife was pregnant with our second son. And so I went to selection in the entire course while my wife was pregnant. So I think I went to one doctor's appointment that entire time. And that was when they do the big scan of like, oh, the spine looks good, this looks good. Is that real in-depth scan? I think that's the only one I went to for that entire pregnancy. But yeah, I graduated in September 2012 and reported to Alpha Company, 91st Civil Affairs Battalion, as the FNG.
What was that like?
Intimidating, because the company had gone to Afghanistan the year prior, and so everyone at that time had Iraq, Afghanistan, other SIMC deployments, whatever. So you're walking in and, you're the new guy. You keep your mouth shut and your eyes open, and you just become a sponge, and you learn and you learn, and then you learn some more. Then you get your team. And one thing I've learned coming up is, and if it was kind of like the draft, where I guess, ERBs or SRBs at the time were circulated around, and we have these many people coming in. Hey, Alpha Company, you're getting 2. And so the first sergeant, because this is what I did as a first sergeant, you kind of circulate stuff around for guys who needed people, and then you find out, hey, you're going to this team or that team.
I was just a guest on another show, and we were talking about what it was like. They had asked what it was like when I walked into my first company, right? Especially like in the soft realm. And I'm going to pose this as like a statement plus a question, but I had mentioned that although some of those guys I had gone through the course with, when I walked in there and I looked around, I felt like I was among giants, because everybody is language qualified. Everybody has all the same qualifications in you. So that just gets you through the door just to show up. But to earn your spot, to stay there each and every day was something that I felt like I owed to them, right? Is that the same way you felt when you got there?
Oh yeah, a lot of these guys are having just a few months in between or deployments. My second team sergeant, I had found out that he had deployed to the Philippines and came back, and I think 3 months later moved over to Alpha and deployed again to Afghanistan for 6 to 9 months. I can't remember. So it's like you have guys who are back to back. They're all SEER qualified. Here's a new guy. The only thing I brought to the table was I was a jump master and I had a CIB. That's all essentially I brought to the table.
Yeah, and a lot of people will look at you and be like, "Cool, bro."
Yeah, who doesn't have that, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where when you keep your mouth shut and you're learning, you're the first guy in, you're the last guy out. You're digging into the portal pages or any reports you can read, trying to figure out what you're doing, where you're going. You start finding, oh, you're going to this area or this country. You start doing your own country study before you even show up to work. So that way, you're proving your worth on day 1 or day 2 or whenever. And it, like you had said, and I think it hits the nail on the head, it's like you never arrive. Like you constantly have to put in the work.
Yeah, and I have carried that with me throughout my entire career. I carried that with me even when I met you. So, we had a mutual friend that said, "Hey, you should come down and come work here." And people know my story. I was here before I left, and then I came back in just a different capacity. And he said, "Hey, man, that's got to go through Zac." And I said, "Okay, all right." Well, and I remember I saw you, and you're like, "Nobody comes here without going through me." And I was like, "All right, right." But I always kept that in my pocket, and of like, "Hey, man, you never arrived. Like, I still have to show him that I even can even earn a spot to be around all these people." Which
and
is
it was
awesome.
the same way, So I was in the company for 5 years, did 4 rotations to East Africa, left, did all my broading assignments, and then I was lucky enough to come back as the first sergeant. And even coming in as the first sergeant, yeah, I had history in the company, but my mentality was I had to prove every day to those teams across the hall that I belonged and I deserved to be their first sergeant. So that's kind of the mentality I had, even as a leader, was like, yes, I'm the first sergeant, but I haven't arrived. I fail one physical gate and I can be fired. So it was just kind of, I'm a big fan of leading through action, not necessarily words. And so I'd always show up at any physical event we were doing. If it was a workout or the PT test, all that, I was always there doing it with the company, no matter what.
Yeah, which speaks volumes, right? Because that's what people are looking to.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you show up, you get to your team. How long were you there before you went on your first deployment with the team?
I got there in October and I left in January for East Africa for 13 months.
Oh, okay. So it's pretty
Correction,
short.
not 13 months, excuse me, 10 months. I deployed in 2013
Okay.
to East Africa for 10 months.
Was there anything? Is there anything that catches you from being on that first rotation on a team that you really took with you that you learned? Especially, so this would have been your third deployment now, like in the Army
Mm-hmm.
overall. You've been married. Your wife's at home with 2 kids, and here you are coming into an organization where you're earning your spot. You're putting in the work. You're putting in the time outside of work, right, to show that you're going to be value added. And then, you go through a small training cycle and you're back out the door again.
Yeah. It was definitely very, very fast. And it's kind of one of those, you don't know what to expect, right? Because a conventional deployment is very different from a soft deployment. We actually drove up to BWI and caught a Space A flight to Germany. We were in Stuttgart, Germany for a few days. And then we hopped on a C-130 with all of our containers. And it took me 4 days to fly from Stuttgart to Djibouti, where I was at, because we started in West Africa and dropped a team off in every one of their countries that they were going to. And, you have crew rest and all that stuff going in. So it's been about 4 days on a C-130 getting to my first deployment location.
What was that first rotation like?
It was interesting, man. I didn't know what to expect. So 1 minute you're doing country study for X, 1 minute you're doing a country study for Y. You don't know what's going on. We ended up going to our first outing from Djibouti we went to Uganda for 3 weeks and taught, the Ugandan People's, the UPDF, the Ugandan People's Defense Force, CMO, so Civil Military Operations. So we did that for 3 weeks, which was interesting because we were there with the SEALs. Another amazing breed of human being. First interaction with them. So it was really cool actually learning the culture actually in country. How do the SEALs interact with their partner force? How do we interact with the SEALs? How do we interact with our partner force? So yeah, we were there for 3 weeks, and we went back to Djibouti, and eventually went back to Uganda later on in the rotation. But it was also that rotation where my team leader and I did 2 weeks in Tanzania training an infantry platoon. I did a week in Kenya teaching negotiations. I did 2 weeks in Burundi with UK partners teaching CIMIC, so NATO SOF CA essentially is what that is. So that one deployment I was able to hit 3 or 4 different countries with multiple partners.
Yeah, which is crazy, right? When you think about the logistical nightmare that it takes to go back and forth. What was your relationship like during that time?
It was interesting. So I left when our second son was 4 months old. I couldn't hold his head up. And so the way the rooms are in Djibouti is the clues or the chews, where it's like a room, a bathroom, and a room on the other side. So my medic and I shared a bathroom, and we had our own room, but we went halvesies on Wi-Fi. So that way, I could roll out of bed and FaceTime my wife and kids, which was amazing. It was worth every penny of the overpriced internet.
For people that don't know, like, you get a lot of people be like, they don't pay
Yeah.
for that. No, you get shafted when you got to pay
Oh
for
yeah.
that.
And
Yeah.
it was funny because they would like 3 months at this price. You thinking it's a discount, right?
No.
No, it was single months added up.
Yeah.
They're just saying you could pay 3 months at a time. But it was actually good because I was finishing my associate's degree at that time. So I took 4 classes at deployment and completed my associates. So not only was I able to see the family, but I was able to complete my associate's degree at the same time.
Heck yeah. So you go through that rotation, then you come home, right? And how long you home for before you get ready to go right back out the door?
I was back in East Africa 11 months to the day that I left.
So that doesn't
Yeah.
include, right? And for people that don't know, there's training that happens in between there. There's all the trips away from home that happen in between there. There's life that happens in between there.
So I would say about 4 months really after you get back is, your individual time where you can go to schools, this, that, and the other. And then you're about 6 months out, you're right into PMT, where you're in the fields, you're in other cities training, doing all that stuff. And so, like, if you think about like Ranger School, I've been looking at going to Ranger School, but I just couldn't do that to my family, knowing my deployment date was already on the wall. I'm only going to be home for 10 to 11 months. I can't be gone for another 3. It's not fair to them. So,
How did your wife and kids handle it with you already having deployment dates already lined up before you even got back?
that's a great question. We kind of just we didn't talk about it until it was close. We just knew, hey, I'm leaving. And with the kids, it was, Daddy's going on another work trip. He'll be back. And to put it in perspective, by the time our middle son was 5 years old, he'd been through 4 deployments. And Jackson is extremely, extremely resilient for all the times that I was gone. Plus, my 2 years in Germany, which I know we're going to get to later in the podcast. But it was just kind of one of those, they knew Daddy was in the Army and Daddy deploys and to keep him safe. So we just kind of took it in stride is all you can really do.
Yeah. So you come back 11 months later, you're back out the door again, right? And you're gone for, how long was that one?
So this one is where I started my 6-month rotations.
Okay.
And this one was a little different. I had switched teams and we found out that the team was all the senior guys in the position. So we had the senior team leader, the senior team sergeant, the senior medic, and then the senior at that time, the CANCO. So because we got selected to do another mission in East Africa, so they didn't want to put someone brand new from the course on a team with a bunch of other new guys. So got lucky, got put on that team, and that was a phenomenal team. You talk about joking and being able to flip the switch from everyone's joking around to boom, we got to brief the quote ambassador in training, which they tried to pull on us one morning. It was just a great group. We always knew when to be serious and we always knew when to have fun. And it made the deployment a lot of fun.
Yeah. Did you, and that's one thing I've always told people before is when people would come to me and be like, man, 6-month rotations seem great. I'm all, okay, they are, except for the fact back then it was 1-to-1. So then when the 6-monther started, it was 6 months gone, 6 months home. So by the time you get home, you're like, I take my 2 weeks of leave and I'm jumping essentially right back into getting back at it again.
Yeah, we were definitely busy. I was deployed every year from 2013 to 2017 for 10 to 6 months at a shot.
And how did that wear on your relationship and everything at home? Like when you look back at it now, and I only ask that because a lot of us at the time were like, hey man, it is what it is, right? Throw it in the ruck. But as you get older and you continue to go on this path, you look back and you're like, and that's the whole premise of this, right? Is to look back and say, I probably could have done better here, and here.
Yeah, I didn't think about it like you were saying then. I think about it now is I just kind of shut my emotions off. Because, you shut your emotions off when you get close to a deployment. You turn them back on when you're coming home and shortly after you get home. But when you're gone that much, you just kind of stop turning them back on, which definitely is not fair to the family. And I'm still dealing with that to this day, where I can just be sitting watching, a commercial and I'll feel like I feel my eyes well up and I just want to bawl my eyes out. Don't know why. Just kind of what I equate it to is it's just you've been disassociated from your emotions for so long that your body doesn't know how to react sometimes. And so when that time comes up, man, just let it out. And because it's one, you feel good afterwards because you're working through something you don't know about. And then I'll go and I'll tell my therapist about it and we'll work through all of that.
When did you start acknowledging it or start looking at it like, hey, I need to get this. I need to start like taking care of this.
Well, that's a loaded question because there's a difference between acknowledging it and actually listening to yourself and following through. Probably between 2019, 2020, both those years I was in Germany assigned to South Africa. And I did an unaccompanied assignment, meaning, I didn't have my wife and kids there with me. And that's where, my drinking really became an issue. I was like, man, this is not healthy. But at the same time, like I didn't want to go and explore Europe because I didn't think it was fair for me to be in Europe and all the cool things Europe has to offer. My wife's here with the kids, paying the bills, making sure the mortgage and all that stuff is taken care of. So I would just sit in my apartment and drink, and a lot. And it got to the point, it's like, man, I need to talk to somebody. No, I can quit when I want. I'll be fine. And then, 2020 happened and COVID. When COVID hit, man, that was not good for me because everything shut down. So I'm locked in an apartment by myself, just drinking my face off because I had nothing else to do. The gyms were closed. I would run every now and then, but being in Germany, they're sticklers for the rules. And so I would maybe run once a week. We do check-ins once or twice a week for work, but then otherwise, man, I'd wake up 8 o'clock in the morning and I'm like, well, I'm not going to talk to anyone today, so might as well start drinking. So I didn't start really until I started getting help with my alcoholism in 2021, excuse me. It's kind of a blur in that time frame. Um, Came home in December 2020, found out in 2021 my wife was having our third son, and it was, I think, the day after the explosion at Abbey Gate happened. President Biden had been given a speech, and he had said some stuff, like something along the lines of, we use the word hero way too much, this, that, and the other, right? And it's 2 days after, a day or two after those 13 service members lost their lives. Man, I just climbed in the bottle. Having served in Afghanistan, lost my commander. That was rough. And that night, I kind of blacked out. My wife and I got into an argument. And I remember waking up. She wasn't in bed next to me. And she had gone downstairs, and our couch downstairs is a pull-out bed. So she moved the coffee table, which is extremely heavy, and got the bed out. Now, mind you, my wife was a high-risk pregnancy. And so for her to move everything, I knew that day that I had screwed up. And I went to my first AA meeting that night. I think it was August 18th, 2021. I went to my first AA meeting and started working on sobriety then. But over all of this, sobriety's been my biggest battle. I've fallen off it, gotten back on, fallen off the wagon, gotten back on. And last summer, let me back up real quick. So tomorrow is the 1 year anniversary of my dad's heart attack. And so we were deployed last year, and I get a message saying, hey, your dad had a heart attack. And I'm like, uh-oh, how bad? And it was bad enough that had mom not been at home and dad had waited for an ambulance, he wouldn't be there today. So I called the commander. I let the battalion command team know. They said, hey, do you want to come home? Let us know. And then at first, I was, hey, I'm good. I'm going to stay. He's okay. But come to find out that it was a massive, massive heart attack. And I lost it that night, man. I was crying. I ended up, drinking, called the commander, called my wife, and I was like, I'm coming home. But instead of coming home to my family in North Carolina, I flew out straight to Nebraska to be with my family. And luckily, Dad was home. So that was great. Got to see him. Got back to North Carolina. And during that time, our commander was tapped to be the battalion S. So he went almost immediately up to be in the S3. And our incoming commander, who was our ops chief, who his wife had their third kid, so he's out. And so they're essentially like, hey, Zach, you're going to command the company, but you have no command authority because you're not an officer. So I did that from April until June, that first weekend in June. And one night I had an emotional breakdown. I was so stressed. And believe it or not, we had been coordinating to have Kyle Morgan come for First Friday. And we were talking with him and everything. I had an emotional breakdown where I pulled my wife into the room and I just was sobbing and crying. And that's the first time I've ever heard her say, maybe you should retire. Because I had planned on doing 25 years and, compete for Sergeant Major and CSM. And I wanted to be the 91st CSM because I'd served in every enlisted position, non-medic, in the battalion. But that night, man, just a switch flipped. And so I reached out to the chaplain in the med shed, and I was like, hey, here's what's going on. Like, I need help.
So, and I think that's where this was kind of born. And where I talked about in the beginning of you being vulnerable was there. Because I remember you came in and you had told everybody, like, hey, I need to take a break. I've been going for X amount of months. I'm like snapping on my kids, and being able to see that, right, was humbling. And it was like a breath of fresh air, because far too often, and I think that comes with experience, it comes with age, it comes with time. because when you're young, you'll just keep running through a wall. Like
Oh yeah.
it takes a lot to stand up, and also it takes a lot to stand up in front of people that, right, you're earning your spot every day to be able to say, hey, I need to take a break. And I say that because I wanted to back up a little bit when you were talking about like being in Germany. So
Yeah.
you go on your last rotations before you get ready to leave a team, right? And you get
Yep.
to Europe and you're there by yourself. Did you ever feel at a point that you couldn't reach out to people that you have served with? Because what I have told people before is like when I left the team, it's not that I couldn't reach out to them. It's just I was no longer in the email chain. I was no longer in the team
Yep.
chat. I was no longer, and nobody ever told me that I couldn't reach out to anybody. It just, at first you take a breath and you're like, man, okay, I feel disconnected. It feels good. And then it almost starts to feel lonely because for some of us, right, and I'm going to ask this a question too, is like, because this
Yeah.
becomes our identity after doing it for so long.
Percent being in soft was my identity through and through for the longest time. And my team leader from my last team, well, when I was on the team, he was one of the team leaders because I went through 3 team leaders on that one team from the time I was the junior guy to the team sergeant.
Hey, they're
He was...
summer help. They're only there for a short time. They come and then they go.
Yeah, that's so true. No, he was in Germany because he got out of active duty, went to the reserves, and he was at AFRICOM, right, working in, because he's a 3-3 French speaker, so he's fluent. So he was down in Africa, up at AFRICOM and whatnot, and he was in town. And there was a day, man, I was just struggling being alone. I was drunk off my ass. Called him, was like, hey man, I need you here now. And he left a family get together with his now wife, who is German, like left her family get together and came to me to be there for me. And he's actually the godfather of my youngest son. Yeah, he was there. I think most of us know we can reach out. We just never want to be a burden to someone. You know what I mean? Like, you can have the phone in your hand. You're like, nah, I'm not going to call him.
How is that changed for you now, like over time?
So when I had my emotional breakdown last year, and I said the switch flip, like being in the military and being soft and all that is no longer my identity. It's kind of just what I do. Um, and it's so freeing because that week, I walked into the CSM's office and was like, hey, I don't want to compete for Sergeant Major anymore. I don't want to compete for an HHC First Sergeant gig. Like, I'm done. And I kind of laid everything out to him, and he's like, hey, man, I get it. We'll see what we can do. I told him what job I wanted, which in a roundabout way is what I'm doing now. At the time, I was told, hey, it's not available. Then it became available. So I essentially walked into CSM's office and was like, for lack of a better words, like, I quit. And he totally gets it because, at the end of the day, it's about your mental health and your well-being. And going down that path that I was on was not healthy. And so having that support system from, the battalion CSM, battalion commander, the med shed, the chaplain, behavioral health, like I still see my therapist, I saw him last week, is been absolutely phenomenal.
Have you continued, or have you reached out to more people now, right? To start like letting them know, like, hey, it's okay to go get help. Like, it's okay. Like, at the end of the day, I say that because it's crazy. Probably a couple months ago, a month ago, I was out on a work trip, and the course was taught by some retired soft guys. And he made a really good comment. He said the people that hang around way too long will start to slip, and they'll start getting really mad at everybody else.
Yep.
Because they're not vulnerable enough to say, like, hey, I need to go ask for help. I need to get out. I need to be able to find an outlet and find me, and build, for lack of a better term, build my new tribe, like build people I can be around.
Oh yeah, it was interesting so I wasn't trying to like hijack Kyle's, brief that day. And you were there. I mean, you were front row, you and your team sergeant at the time. And I kind of always knew, like, yes, you bring a tier 1 operator in, to say like, hey, this is how I screwed up. And Kyle was completely vulnerable that day. Like, he and his wife spoke. That's one thing, but when you hear someone in your formation that's in a leader, it hits a little different. It's so, I told, for the folks that weren't there, I told the entire battalion that was there that first Friday, like, hey, I just completed my behavioral health intake. I'm working with the chaplain. I'm working with the PA. But I only did that because the battalion command team had put so much time into building the team for those instances. Had that team not been there, we may not even be talking today. I could still be a first sergeant inside a bottle. It could have gone a completely different direction. But because I trusted my leaders and I felt safe, I felt that I could let others know. And then come to find out, a few other people in the audience that day were like, snap, like, and they raised their hand like, I need help. So that made me feel kind of good knowing that people in the audience, I mean, they benefited more from Kyle's story than mine, but that people are like, oh, it is okay to get help. It is okay to say, hey, I need to talk to someone.
Yeah, and I think people should take away, just because we were fortunate, right, or you were fortunate enough to have leaders that set the team and put the right people in the right places, doesn't mean if you're in an organization where other people, your boss or corporate, whatever, military, hasn't set that team, doesn't mean you can't set the precedence at your level. You know what I mean?
100%.
And that's something you should always try and tell people, man. When you build your tribe, like, be around like-minded people. It's okay. You can set the team at any level that you're at.
Oh, yeah. And all it takes is a simple, hey, I can't do that. Here's why. Right? It's kind of like boundaries. You got to set your boundaries. Excuse me. I could be like, hey, Chad, we're going to go do this. Right? Hey, Chad, we're going to go to a bar. And if you're in recovery, you're like, hey, I'm not going to a bar. What are you talking about? And name calling. You're like, look, man, I'm in recovery. That's not a good situation for me to be in. Right? And then that's when a good teammate is like, you know what? You're right. Right? Let's go do something. Let's go golfing, fishing, doing something else. So it's about being able to also set your boundaries and sticking to them. Because I didn't stick to my boundaries there for a while. And leading into later last year, I was having a lot of back problems. And I couldn't, like, mornings I couldn't stand up straight. I couldn't figure out why. And then I, again, fell off the wagon and started drinking. And I am an absolute asshole when I drink. Just an absolute dick. And it got to the point where January 5th, I was taken by ambulance to Cape Fear because I thought I was having a heart attack. When my wife finally got to the hospital and was able to see me hours later, she realized I had been drinking that night. And so we were talking a few days later. She's like, do you think what happened was a way that your body was like, you're going down a bad road? And so kind of doing a reset. And I was like, I don't know, but that's a great way to look at it. I have no clue. And since then, I found out that I have bulging discs in my L spine. I've gotten into the pain clinic. I've had procedures done to try to fix stuff. 1 day sober today. So it's kind of one of those, it was a reset that not many people get. And it's not the first time my wife's had to go through this, and she's still standing by my side.
Yeah, and you're super fortunate for that. And then obviously, but right, you've got a lot of, somebody told me this, I'm going to give him a shout out here, Denny. He's the host of the Security Halt podcast. And we had a discussion not long ago. And we were talking a lot about what you're talking about, right? Going down these roads. And he made a really comment. He made a huge comment that stuck with me. He said, hey, man, don't fear getting out. Don't fear losing your support. The team room's bigger on the outside. And I was like,
that's good.
I was like, wow, like, that's so true, though. You know what I mean? Like, we think about our team room or our organization, and we're like, hey, it's only these 4, 10, 15 bubbas. But it's like, no, man. Think about all those other people that have come before you that you have contact with, that just being vulnerable enough to pick up the phone. Like, the team room's big on the outside.
Oh, yeah. And so I started a chat. It's on WhatsApp back before we knew WhatsApp had been, hacked and all that stuff. No, so, I was on Cat 113 for 5 years and trying to build that legacy where from the time we got to the team, I got to the team in 2014, all the way up until, you know, my time as a first sergeant. A few of those guys, like, we're in a chat under the name Cat 113, and it's some of these dudes have never met each other, but we're all in the same chat because we all have the same things in common. And that's where guys bust stones. That's where guys can be vulnerable. That's when guys are like, hey, is there anyone in this area? I need some help. And that's all because back when I was in Germany, I was struggling one night, and I felt that was my best way, is just picking up the phone and starting a chat.
Yeah, no, that's I mean, spot on right there. It brings me to think of this, and I know we've talked about it too, but like the foundational thing that we are trying to build this organization to be, right, is to help people refine their values, for people to move past their trauma, for people to take their successes, their failures, those difficult times, and reach somebody with it, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. The team room's bigger on the outside. If your story can affect somebody else and help them get through it, it's an absolute win.
Oh,
And
100%.
what over time this has evolved, and what we've deemed it as human performance, in my own word, right, is physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual fitness. And I don't even, balance isn't the right word, but a harmony. A harmony would be a better word, to have all those components, right, synchronized, being able to go. But like through your story, like you've been talking about how you've like fallen out of balance. And I guess the question I would pose now, using those, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual components, how do you implement those in your life now to kind of stay balanced? I mean, 61 days sober, right? Like,
Yep.
how are you going to use those?
Man, that's a great question. So,
Well, great.
So I'll just take each one, right? We'll start with physical. At one point, you know, I had to stop going to the gym because I couldn't stand up straight without being in severe pain. You know, in 2 weeks, I plan on running the Mike to Mike half marathon because of working with my strength coach, who you know, and the pain clinic at Fort Bragg, getting back up to physically being able to lift things. Like, I deadlifted for the first time the other day in 8, 9, 10 months. Granted, it was just, I think, 135, but just doing that motion for a few reps, a few sets, it's like, all right, baby, I'm back.
Lightweight.
Respect your elder, son. So even on days where I don't feel like getting in the gym, I get in the gym, and even if it's 30 minutes on the elliptical, right? It's just that kind of feeds into the mental of, if I don't go to the gym, then I don't feel right. Or if I don't work out, we'll say it that way, because, right, I might go run the Cape Fear River Trail that morning. It's like I need to do something in the morning so that way it kind of like centers me so I can go attack my day. And during my long runs, you know, train up for the half marathon, that's where I do a lot of my thinking. Or I just zone out too at times, where there's like, you're just kind of listening to music and literally thinking about nothing, which I know is a weird concept for some to think about and grasp. But it's like you're just one with nature, right? That's it. So that goes back into the mental of just having that time to center yourself, to think of things like, okay, hey, I need to do this today, that today. I got this tonight with the kids and whatnot. And that's where calendars come in. Our family has a calendar where if it's not on the calendar, it's not a thing, you know? So there's that. For emotional, that's where it's being vulnerable with my wife. And when I fell off the wagon a few years ago and talking with the chaplain, he said something that was really profound, was, you robbed your spouse the opportunity to be there for you. As men, we're always going to be there for our spouse, right? We want to be the tough, big guys, strong men, war heroes, war fighters, all that hero bullshit. But we forget that, you know, our wives want to be there for us. And when we put on that bravado, we deny them the opportunity to be there for us. And shortly after I got sober, you know, we got my oldest son's a diehard Denver Nuggets fan, and we got him tickets to see the Charlotte Hornets play the Denver Nuggets. And so he and I go to the game, And as soon as you walk into the stadium, it is just beer. Beer vendors, beer coolers, beer this, beer that. And my old ways started taking over of like, we'll go find our seats. And if my son doesn't want to walk around, I'll just grab a beer and walk around and drink it, right? No one's going to know. And then I was like, no, because then I'm going to have to lie to my wife about it. And so I started thinking how that would go. And as I was working through this mental process, the whole urge to drink went away. And so I pulled my phone out and I texted her everything immediately. I was like, hey, I had an urge, this, that, and the other. Um, and so, she appreciated the fact that I even through a text, I was like, hey, I almost drank, but I didn't because I thought of you. So really the emotional, it's not just with her, but like you're saying, just being vulnerable to, if someone comes up and is saying they're struggling with something, you got to be able to be vulnerable and share your story. Again, this goes back to the bravado. Bravado's over, man. Like those times where everyone's tough and whatnot, like you have to be able to let people know around you that it's okay to not be okay. Right? Our generation fought the GWAT for 20 years. There's gonna be some unsolved or unresolved issues with that. So it is okay to not be okay. And
Yeah,
then
and that's a really good that's a really good point. And I'll give a shout out here to Tom Satterley and the crew at All Secure Foundation. And
oh yeah,
Tom Tom made a really good point at the retreat last year of saying that same thing, and in a nice, kind of nice way, was like, it's not all about being foo foo fa fa. Like you didn't just give up your warrior spirit because you're trying to find help. If you need me to turn it back on, I can turn it back on, right? And I would argue that you're in that same way, right? Like you're just trying to help yourself. But if someone said you got to go to work, like you'd be able to do it.
yeah, game on, yeah. And then going into the spiritual realm, which probably didn't help too much. So I'm a practicing Catholic and I'm a proud member of the Knights of Columbus. And there for a while after I redeployed, like I'd stopped going to church. Our priest that we had in the church for years, and a phenomenal American, phenomenal human being. He was sober for 43, 44 years before he passed away. And like that morning back in August 2000 or 2021 that's who I went to when I left work that day as a recovering alcoholic. He and I went to my first AA meeting together. Father Jack Kelly. I'll never forget him. And so we went from him to having this new priest who was tough to understand because he was from Colombia, right? And I wasn't in a good headspace. So I kind of just stopped going to church. And looking back now, I was like, I could see the devil slowly working his way into my life. You don't know it at the time because that's a crafty bastard. But looking back, like I could see it, right? Because I started drinking again with my back. Instead of telling my wife, hey, I'm hurting, I would just buy booze, and I hid it very well from her. To the point where it's like, no, at the start of this year, I was like, nope, I'm going back to church. And I kind of feel bad because I feel like my Knights of Columbus Council suffered being the Grand Knight for the council, which, if you don't know what that is, think of it like the president of the council. They probably suffered for a couple of months. And I told them in January, I apologized. January, February, I apologized for not being there. And I explained why. I explained that I've been battling sobriety for years and I'd fallen off the wagon, which they understood. And so now being sober and going back to church every weekend, I'm getting back into the nights. And, I'm playing that golf tournament, which you know about. April 5th, Kings Grant. Just saying, shameless plug. All proceeds go to our scholarship fund for the Knights of Columbus, JMP Malkowitz Fund. Another plug. It's surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals on all realms. One of my brother Knights, who's a retired 18 Delta, is leading something through Lent. Every Monday and Thursday morning at 06, we meet at the church chapel and we do the daily readings. We have a Lenten reading, and we pray the rosary, right? And it's, because I don't give up anything for Lent anymore. I always try to find a way during Lent to get closer to Christ. And that's what I'm doing this Lent. And, bless Colin, his mom passed away a few weeks ago. And so he'll be out next week at the funeral. So now I'm leading the sessions, right? I felt called to lead that session. And so that's how I'm starting to get right on the spiritual realm, is I'm leaning into my faith and not steering away from it like I was last year.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's spot on. That's always that one component of the It's always that one component, right, that a lot of people will shy away from.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because it's, for some people, it's uncomfortable to talk about, and I think that's in any setting, right? But especially in a place where, we work, right? A lot of people, again, you don't want to be. A lot of people don't want to be vulnerable. I know times are changing, right? And a lot of the people that right, because you just left where we're at, like, people are all coming around to that, and they're all being more open about it. And I think it's being more vulnerable about all this and saying, like, how you can help others is just, it's going to help more and more people as these generations continue to grow.
Yeah, and I still find myself having that GWAT mentality, as we call it. You have a guy who's come in and done maybe one deployment, one train up, and they're like, I need a break. And the old GWAT mentality is, a break from what? Right? But then you're like, nope. And, Kyle Morgan says, great, like, you can't compare traumas. So my 7 combat rotations is different from this guy's first rotation because he's never done it, right? I had Iraq and Afghanistan before I came to SOF. He didn't, or she didn't. So that's a significant emotional event going through that as a young couple coming in. And so we got checked on deployment, the commander and I, because at one point we had the GWAT mentality, and the guy's wife was having trouble, and we're like, well, suck it up, buttercup. Spoke to the battalion commander, and he's like, why would you think that, right? We didn't get scolded, we didn't get in trouble, but the battalion commander walked us through the whole thought process to the point where the commander and I realized that we had screwed up, and we called the service member back, and we apologized. We're like, hey, like, this is where we were coming from. This was the mentality we've always had, which he understood, and he accepted our apology, and he had said that, with our initial reaction, he was already looking forward to getting out of the military. And with that apology, it changed his mind, which is good, because young dude, right, full of piss and vinegar, E5, got his Ranger tab before he even got to us. I think he's training for, or maybe recently graduated jump master. Like, he's the guy you want. And because of some boneheadedness on mine and the commander's part, we almost lost a great service member.
Yeah. No, I mean, spot on, man. It's just, it is, right? And it's just lessons. And it's.
Oh, yeah.
And not that
sometimes
those are
it's trial and error, unfortunately.
No, 100%, right? And being able to pass that off to somebody else, right? Because all this comes in ebbs and flows, right? There'll be a new generation that comes in, and something else will happen, and they'll have the same trajectory that we had, right? And we hope that the lessons that you have from this, that they'll learn from that, and the mentality will change later on.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
But I guess I would ask now, what is your plan going forward now that you're getting ready to wrap this whole thing up, and you got to go be a real boy now and figure out what you really want to do?
I have no idea what I want to be when I grow up. I have no clue. When I made the decision to retire last year, I started re-networking, putting out feelers like, my old team sergeant, he's a bigwig somewhere in Ohio. I was like, hey, I'm going to retire. He's like, cool, let me know when you're a year out. I'll see if I have a job. Or we have a lot of guys in the community that get out and get hired on, as executives in various businesses. Like the guy I'm thinking of right now, I don't know if he's like the COO of like a trucking company in Chicago or something like that. He hit me up on LinkedIn and was like, hey, you want to move to Georgia? Because he knows I'm retiring. So I'm waiting to hear back on his response of where in Georgia and what's the gig before I commit. But it's really just getting out there and re-networking. Since coming out from being a first sergeant, I had to find that new passion in life, right? Because my passion was training the next guys and deploying them and whatnot. And going back to that golf tournament, man, like, that is something that my wife and I are actually doing together. She's doing a lot of behind the scenes work, but going out there because it's such a good cause, right? Youth scholarships in the community, where we've awarded 67 scholarships totaling $40,000 to date. Stuff's not getting cheaper. So that's been my passion, kind of like a rekindling, is going out and trying to make sure we have the good golf tournament and we have sponsors so we can build that up. And so it's kind of just refinding passions of certain things. Otherwise, I have no clue what's next. I'm taking it day by day, which is great. I'm not stressing getting out. I'm not. That's one thing I definitely am not stressing about is retirement, because I know the time's come. And again, I'm going to quote Kyle Morgan. He said it last June when we were in the room together. Could I keep going? Yeah, probably. Should I? No, not at all. I think the minute as a leader you lose empathy for those in your charge, it's time to hang it up. And that's where I was at last summer.
Yeah. No, I mean, perfectly well said, man. And I think this is an awesome way to throw it out that probably about 2 weeks ago now, we threw out a post, right, of who would be interested in growing your tribe, right? And like getting around like-minded people. Again, the team room's bigger on the outside. And
yeah.
It was super awesome to see that you were one of the people that was like, yup. So,
Yep.
and you start hearing things like that and you're like, you know what, man, you're right. There is a lot of support out there. And I look forward to growing that. I look forward to seeing you on there and seeing how we can like keep building it out and bring in like more people and make it, make it a study, make it a thing, another chat, right? That people can use and utilize
absolutely.
and resources and like let people know that, hey man, just because you're closing this chapter in your life doesn't mean that the next one isn't going to be as awesome.
It's all about your mentality, I'm going to just use surgery, right, as kind of a common denominator. When I had shoulder surgery in 2021, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be so painful. It's going to take forever to recover, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, no, it's not, right? 5 months, 29 days later, I was cleared through physical therapy and my surgeon. All right, so it's a mindset. If your Army chapter closes and you start your next chapter with, oh man, this is going to suck. Yeah, it's going to suck. But if you start with, all right, how am I going to kick this chapter in the ass? Then it's going to be awesome. So it's all about your mindset. And I'm excited to retire. Not that I hated my time in the Army. I've absolutely loved it. But I'm ready to see what the next chapter has.
I guess I'll close it out with this. Knowing what you know now, if you could look back and tell young Zac about all the heartache and the pain that he was about to go through and cause his spouse, what would you tell him? Or, right, what would you tell somebody else that's living that exact story right now?
Ooh. All right, so I'm going to take that as a 2-part question.
Yeah, go ahead. See, that's why you're smart.
I got my notes, so give me a second. So I'd tell younger me, like, don't change anything because it made you who you are today. There's going to be times that absolutely suck. There's going to be times, I'll never forget it, when I got back to Germany after a leave. It was raining in North Carolina. I don't know if it was Fayetteville or Raleigh. And my wife looked at my middle son, who was just staring out the car window at the rain, and she's like, Jackson, are you okay? He's just like, I miss Daddy, right? And I read that on Facebook, dude, and I'm talking ugly sobbed. Ugly sobbed, because it tore my heart out, right? But then going back to that, the spiritual well-being is, I told myself, I was like, all right, God, I'm here for a reason. I'm going through this for a reason. I trust you. And he got me through it. So I'd tell the younger me, don't change anything because it makes you who you are. If to tell someone who's going through a similar story, reach out, man. Reach out. Put down the bottle, the pills, the gun. Reach out. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength, reaching out and telling someone, hey, you need help. Right? Even if that is, you don't think you can call anyone other than 911. Call 911. They will send first responders to be there for you. Reach out. There's too many people who feel they can't. And I can assure you, Chad, if you call me tonight at 3:00 in the morning, I'm going to pick my phone up. If you say, hey, I need to talk to someone, if you want me to come meet face to face, I'll bring the coffee. Don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. And it's just for people to hear, like, you have that. You just need to exercise it and utilize it. You're not 100%. The only one feeling that way. You are not the only one feeling that way.
Yep. Some of us are there, some of us have been there, and it's our job to take care of each other.
And some of us right, to your point, are still there, right? You're 61 days. Like, it'll be a lifelong journey, you know?
Yep. Yeah. I
Well,
would like to
Zac,
add one thing, if you don't
yeah,
mind.
no, I don't
Dude,
mind.
I love what you guys are doing at Beyond the Track. You know, I follow you guys on Soch, I think is how the kids say it nowadays. Now, what you guys are doing, it's so big and it's so huge and it's not your normal podcast. Yeah, it told some more stories, but not really. When you get, a couple of vets together, what do? Tell embellished war stories.
Yeah.
But now what you guys are doing, trying to reach out and reach that one person, man, that is huge and that is awesome to watch. And if you ever need help at any event, man, you got my number. Just hit me up.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And
Yeah.
we'll keep you posted. We do have some events coming up, actually, that you might want to be a part of. And
Done.
we'll let everybody know. But it'll be a good time. But Zac,
I got my
thank you.
shirt now.
There you go, dude. You better rock it everywhere. I'm starting to see them everywhere. You'll start noticing when you go to the gym. You'll start seeing them. It's a little campaign, if you will.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
But heck yeah. Thanks, Zac. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, Chad. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.